The sound of gunfire ripped through the valley before anyone had time to breathe. Dirt exploded around the patrol as Staff Sergeant Elena Torres hit the ground, her cheek grinding against the rough Afghan soil. Her ears rang, her weapon kicked against her chest as she scrambled into cover behind a broken stone wall. The ambush was timed perfectly, too perfectly. Someone had given the enemy their route. "Contact left! Contact left!" shouted Corporal Henson, his voice breaking with panic as rounds cracked overhead. He was too exposed. Elena grabbed the back of his vest and yanked him down just as a bullet chewed the wall where his head had been. "Stay low. Put rounds out, damn it," she snapped, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had been here before. She rose just enough to shoulder her M4 and returned fire, careful, disciplined shots. Her heart hammered but her breathing stayed steady. She knew panic was contagious, so was control. Private Langston, barely 20, screamed that his leg was hit. Elena's gut twisted. They were pinned, and now they had a casualty. She crawled to him, bullets slapping against the dirt. His thigh was a bloody mess, arterial. She didn't waste time cursing. She pulled the tourniquet from his kit and cranked it tight until his screams turned to gasps. "Stay with me, Langston," she muttered, pressing her hand on his helmet for just a second before forcing herself back into the fight. 6, this is Red 1. We are pinned. Grid 247831, troops in contact, requesting immediate air support, her radio operator shouted, voice cracking through static. No answer. The valley swallowed signals like a grave. That left her. Torres made the call herself. Henson, smoke out left. Move toward that ridge. Jackson, suppressive fire. We're bounding out, 2 at a time. They moved because she said it with steel. They moved because hesitation meant death. Henson threw purple smoke, coughing through the haze as he sprinted forward. Jackson's weapon rattled, loud and angry, holding the enemy's heads down. Elena dragged Langston by his vest with raw strength she didn't know she had. She was 5'6", wiry, tattoo of a single wing peeking from her sleeve, and right then it might as well have been armor. The firefight stretched minutes into an eternity. Mortar thumps sounded in the distance, the enemy had heavier weapons, and they weren't letting the Americans slip away without punishment. A shell landed behind them, throwing dust and rocks into the air. Someone shouted prayers. Someone else cursed until their voice cracked. Elena kept moving, kept pushing. They reached the rocks of the ridge, bruised and exhausted. She barked at Henson to set up a defensive position, at Jackson to check ammo. Her hands trembled as she reloaded, but no one saw it. She couldn't let them see it. What now?" Henson asked, chest heaving. His eyes darted around, the look of a man teetering on the edge. "We hold," she said flatly. "We hold until air hears us, or until we make it out. Those are the only 2 options." He nodded because she gave him no room not to. Another shell landed close enough to rattle their teeth. Langston cried out, trying to keep himself awake. Elena knelt by him, squeezed his shoulder. "You're not dying on me, Private. Not today. You'll be home before you know it, annoying some waitress with your bad jokes." He tried to grin. It looked more like a grimace, but it was enough. Finally, through the static, a voice, "Red 1, this is Reaper. We're overhead. Mark your position." Elena nearly sagged with relief. Henson popped green smoke, and within moments the sky tore open with the thunder of an A-10's gun run. The enemy position erupted, explosions echoing across the valley. Dust and smoke rose, then silence fell. The patrol wasn't cheering. Too many close calls, too much blood. Langston was still bleeding, though stable for now. Jackson sat heavily on the ground, his hands shaking uncontrollably as adrenaline crashed out of his body. Elena forced herself upright, scanning the field. She saw bodies. Enemy fighters torn apart by the airstrike. She didn't feel victory. She felt cold. "Load up. We're moving to Exfil Point Delta," she ordered. Her tone left no room for argument. Hours later, back at base, the medic took Langston. He'd live. Elena let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She leaned against the wall of the aid station, her eyes closing for a moment. She was bone-deep tired. When she walked back into the squad bay, conversation stopped. A few of the younger soldiers glanced at her sleeve, at the ink visible when she rolled it up to wipe sweat from her face. A small wing, etched in sharp lines. "That's it," one of them muttered, just loud enough. "All this hype about Torres' tattoo, and it's just a little wing." Laughter followed. Tension release, nervous and mocking at the same time. Someone said it looked like a sticker. Someone else joked that maybe she lost the rest of the bird in a bet. Elena didn't rise to it. She just sat down on her bunk, unstrapped her boots, and rubbed her sore feet. She'd heard worse. She knew why she had that wing inked on her skin, and none of them did. That was enough. Then the door opened, and the room froze. A man in navy fatigues walked in, silver hair close-cropped, face weathered like stone. The trident insignia gleamed on his chest. A SEAL commander, unmistakable. Soldiers shot to their feet instinctively. He looked around once, then his eyes locked on Elena. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, heels clicking. And to the disbelief of every soldier in the room, he snapped a sharp salute. The laughter died like a candle snuffed out. "Sergeant Torres," the commander said, voice low but carrying. "It's been a long time." Elena stood, returning the salute with crisp precision. Her face gave nothing away, but inside, memories clawed their way up, dust, smoke, a helicopter crash years ago, and a promise made over the body of someone she couldn't save. "Yes, sir," she said evenly. The SEAL commander gave a single nod, then turned and left as quickly as he had come. No one in the squad bay spoke for a long minute. The only sound was the buzz of the fluorescent light. Finally, Henson whispered, "What the hell just happened?" Elena sat back down, silent. The wing tattoo burned on her arm like a brand, and the air in the room felt heavier than gunpowder. She knew this was only the beginning. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of the firefight, not because of Langston's screams, not because of the commander's salute, but because she knew something bigger was coming. That ambush had been too clean. Too well planned. Someone had fed the enemy information, and if the SEALs were paying attention, it meant this wasn't just a local militia problem. She sat on her bunk, staring at her rifle propped against the wall. She thought about the wing. About the man who had worn the other one, years ago, and never made it home. Henson stirred from the bunk across the room. "You awake, Sarge?" "Yeah. You think we're gonna be okay out here?" She didn't answer right away. She thought about lies that comfort and truths that burn. "We'll make it," she said finally. "But it won't be easy." And she knew in her gut that the war was about to get darker, sharper, and far more personal than anyone in her unit was ready for. The desert night was never silent. Even when the firefight stopped, the wind carried a constant whisper, like voices in another language Julia couldn't quite understand. She lay on her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling of the tent, every creak and rattle reminding her she was alive, barely. Her shoulder throbbed, the bandages stiff with dried blood, but the pain was dull compared to the sharp sting in her gut. 3 men gone. Anderson, Jorgensen, Klein. Their bunks were empty now, gear packed into bags that sat like gravestones at the edge of the tent. Sleep hadn't come. Her squad mates drifted in and out of restless dozing, jerking awake at phantom explosions. Julia sat up quietly, careful not to jostle her wound. Vega was awake too, polishing his rifle like he was afraid to let it sit still. His eyes flicked to her and back. No words. Just the sound of cloth against steel. Morning arrived with the screech of generators and the clatter of boots outside. The briefing tent filled quickly. Sergeant Barlow's face was harder than usual, eyes sunk deeper. He looked at them like he was taking attendance at a funeral. "Yesterday was bad," he said flatly, skipping any pleasantries. "We walked into a trap. We lost good men. Command doesn't want us sitting back on our heels. Intel suggests the same cell that hit us is holed up 3 clicks northeast, in a cluster of compounds. Orders are to move out at 1400. Clear it. Get answers. Get payback." Julia felt her stomach twist. Her shoulder wasn't healed, hell, it barely held together with the bandages, but she knew what was coming. She wasn't sitting this one out. Barlow's eyes landed on her. "Keen, you good to run the gun?" She swallowed the spike of pain and nodded. "I'm good, Sergeant." Vega frowned, whispering under his breath, "That's bullshit. She needs a med evac, not another mission." Barlow caught the whisper, but his tone didn't soften. "We don't have replacements, Vega. Keen's proven she can hold the line. That's all I care about." No one argued further. They all knew what it meant to be shorthand. The rest of the day blurred with routine, gear checks, weapon cleaning, ammo distribution. Julia tried flexing her shoulder, testing its limits. Pain flared, but the joint held. She strapped her armor tight, the pressure almost comforting. The little wing tattoo peeked out from beneath the cuff of her glove, and she ran her thumb over it like a prayer. When the convoy rolled out, the sun was high and merciless. The desert shimmered with heat, distant ridges dancing like illusions. Julia's Humvee rattled along the rutted path, the engine growling, every bump making her wound flare. She kept her eyes sweeping the terrain, ditches, culverts, rooftops. Every shadow was suspect. Vega sat across from her, chewing his lip, restless. "Feels too quiet," he muttered. "Always does," she answered. Barlow's voice cut through the radio, 2 mics out. Eyes open. The compounds appeared ahead, clusters of mud brick houses, low walls, rusted gates. Children darted between doorways, vanishing as the convoy neared. Julia's nerves tightened. Civilians cleared out before a fight. It was a bad sign. The lead vehicle halted. Soldiers dismounted, spreading into a staggered line. Julia kept her grip firm on the M240, turret swiveling with her gaze. Her throat was dry, palms slick. Barlow raised his fist. The squad stacked on a crumbling wall, rifles up, ready to breach. Julia provided overwatch, scanning for rooftop threats. She caught a flicker of movement, a curtain shifting in a window. She didn't fire. Not yet. The first door went down with a thunderous kick. The squad poured in, shouts echoing. Julia strained to hear through the ringing in her ears. Then, gunfire erupted inside. Short, violent bursts. Screams. Her stomach lurched. Seconds dragged. Then Vega's voice crackled through comms, "Room clear. 2 hostile down." They moved house to house, methodical, deliberate. Julia's nerves wound tighter with each pause, each gunshot, each muffled order. Civilians huddled in corners, wide-eyed and silent. Some cried. Some glared. None spoke. At the 4th compound, everything went wrong. The breach was clean. The first room was empty, just mats and a cooking pot. But the second room blew apart the moment the door swung open. A hidden charge detonated, the shockwave ripping through walls. Julia saw the flash even from outside, the concussion rocking her turret. Dust and screams filled the comms. "Vega's down. Vega's down," someone yelled. Her heart stopped. She scanned, but the dust cloud was impenetrable. Figures staggered out, dragging bodies. Vega was limp between 2 soldiers, his face pale, leg mangled. Blood soaked through his pants, a jagged shard of rebar jutting out. Julia's chest clenched. She wanted to jump down, to help, but her post anchored her. Her job was to keep everyone else alive. She kept the gun ready, eyes burning with frustration. The squad regrouped in the courtyard, chaos swirling. Medics worked frantically on Vega, tying tourniquets, shouting for morphine. He groaned, half-conscious, face contorted with pain. "Enemy knew we were coming," Barlow snapped, fury in his voice. "They're watching. Stay sharp." As if on cue, gunfire ripped from the rooftops. Bullets stitched the courtyard, sparks and dust spraying. Julia spun, unleashing fire. Her rounds tore into the rooftops, dropping one, scattering others. Her shoulder screamed in protest, but she ignored it, rage fueling her. The fight turned brutal. Insurgents fired from alleys, from doorways, from holes blasted in the walls. Julia kept the heavy gun roaring, carving space for her squad to maneuver. Every decision was instinct, when to suppress, when to shift, when to trust her gut. Each burst meant someone else had a chance to live. Minutes stretched like hours. The squad fought tooth and nail, clearing room after room, dragging civilians out, dodging ambush after ambush. The compounds became a maze of smoke and fire. Julia's ammo belt ran dry, the M240 clicking empty. She ripped another belt from the pouch, jamming it in with trembling hands, sweat stinging her eyes. Pain blurred her vision, but she locked in, refusing to falter. Finally, the shooting thinned. The insurgents melted back into the alleys, vanishing like ghosts. Silence returned, broken only by moans of the wounded and the crackle of burning debris. The courtyard was a wreck. Spent brass littered the ground, blood streaked the walls, and Vega lay pale, drifting in and out. Medics worked feverishly, but Julia knew. His odds weren't good. Barlow paced, fists clenched. "We got nothing. No intel, no prisoners. Just dead men and wounded." He kicked a spent magazine, anger boiling over. "They bled us for nothing." Julia slid down from the turret, legs shaky. She knelt by Vega, gripping his hand. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, but when they found her, he managed a weak grin. "You still standing?" he rasped. "Barely," she whispered, throat tight. "Then keep standing. Don't let this," his voice broke off, fading into a groan as the medic pressed another bandage. The helicopter came at dusk, blades thundering. They loaded Vega and 2 others aboard, the medics shouting over the noise. Julia stood back, watching the bird lift into the smoky sky, carrying her friend away. She felt hollow, like the desert had carved something out of her chest and left it empty. Back at base, the mood was grim. The mission had cost them dearly, and they had nothing to show for it but scars. Julia sat in the tent again, shoulder burning, hands shaking. She stared at her tattoo, the ink smeared with dried blood. She wanted to believe it still meant something. Lift. Survival. Promise. But for the first time, doubt crept in. How many promises could she keep before they broke her? As she sat there, the tent flap rustled. The SEAL commander entered again, eyes sharp, posture rigid. He scanned the weary faces, the bandages, the empty bunks. His gaze settled on Julia. "You held that gun when the rest of them would have been cut down," he said quietly. "But holding isn't enough anymore. They're adapting. You'll need to, too. Or you won't make it home." Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask how. She wanted answers, certainty. But the commander just looked at her like the weight of the world was now on her shoulders. Then he turned and left, leaving the silence heavier than before. Julia lay back on her cot, eyes wide open, the words echoing in her skull. Holding wasn't enough. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing: if she faltered, if she froze, more names would vanish from their roster. And she wasn't ready to carry more ghosts. The desert night whispered again, carrying voices she didn't understand. Only this time, she thought she heard one clearer than the rest. "Keep standing." The desert heat hit Julia like a hammer as soon as she stepped out of the tent. The air felt thicker today, the kind that made your lungs burn just for existing. She slung her rifle across her chest, the strap digging into her healing shoulder, and forced herself to keep her face straight. Any sign of weakness out here wasn't just dangerous, it was contagious. Soldiers fed off each other's energy. If one cracked, others followed. Vega's empty cot haunted her. He was still alive, but no word had come since the medevac whisked him away. Every night Julia imagined him on a hospital bed somewhere far from this wasteland, his leg gone, his smirk gone with it. She had no idea if he'd ever come back. She did know that the next mission was already loading onto trucks, as if none of it mattered. Barlow gathered the squad under the blazing sun. His voice was gravel, harsher than usual. "Command's got a new lead. Intel from drones shows heavy movement around an old radio tower 10 clicks west. Same cell that hit us, most likely. They're coordinating bigger strikes. We're tasked with recon and disruption. No civilians out there. That means we go hard." A few heads nodded, but no one cheered. No one had cheered in weeks. Julia's eyes drifted to the horizon where the heat blurred the sand. Somewhere out there, men were digging in, waiting to kill them. The convoy rolled, dust choking the air. Julia manned the gun again, every bump stabbing her shoulder, every vibration rattling her ribs. The little wing tattoo peeked out from her glove, the edges darker now from sunburn and grime. She touched it without thinking, almost superstitious. "Still rubbing that thing like it's magic?" Private Mills asked from the back seat, smirking through his nerves. Julia gave him a thin smile. "Better magic than luck. Luck runs out. Don't tell me you think that wing kept you alive last time." She turned her gaze back to the horizon. "I know it did." Mills didn't press further. The tower loomed ahead, skeletal and rusted, surrounded by scrub and crumbling concrete outbuildings. At first glance, it looked deserted, but Julia's gut told her otherwise. The air felt wrong, too still. Barlow's voice crackled in her headset. "Dismount. Sweep the perimeter." The squad fanned out, rifles up, moving cautious. Julia's gun covered them from the Humvee, her eyes sharp. A stray glint caught her eye on the tower's second platform, barely there, but enough. She froze. Scope glint again. "Sniper, 2 o'clock, second level," she shouted. Her finger squeezed the trigger, but the shot came first. A sharp crack split the air, and Private Mills dropped, clutching his throat as blood gushed between his fingers. He crumpled before anyone could grab him. "Contact!" Barlow roared, dragging the squad behind cover. Bullets rained from the outbuildings, machine guns chattering. The quiet landscape erupted into a storm of fire. Julia's rage surged. She cut loose with the M240, her rounds tearing chunks out of the platform until the sniper toppled, lifeless, from the structure. But Mills was already gone, his eyes glassy, his body jerking once before going still. Her stomach knotted. Another name. Another ghost. The fight dragged them deeper. Grenades exploded near the base of the tower, shaking the ground. Julia laid down suppressive fire while the squad pressed forward, breaching the outbuildings. Shouts and gunfire echoed inside. She kept the belt-fed weapon roaring, brass spilling around her boots, smoke stinging her eyes. One figure broke from cover, sprinting with something in his arms. Julia tracked him, finger tense, but then froze. It wasn't a rifle. It was a child, no older than 8, crying, clinging to his chest. The insurgent used him as a shield, running for the hills. Her mind split in half. If she fired, the boy would die. If she didn't, the man would escape, and maybe come back with another ambush. Her pulse thundered. The squad shouted in her headset, demanding suppression on the retreating figure. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Then the man slipped, stumbling on loose gravel. For a second the child's body shifted clear. Instinct seized her. She fired a short burst. The man went down, chest shredded. The boy rolled free, wailing in terror but alive. The squad surged past, securing the area, but Julia couldn't move. She stared at the child, shaking, his face smeared with dust and tears. He looked right at her with eyes that were too big, too old already. Her stomach lurched. She wanted to climb down, to scoop him up, to promise he was safe. But her job chained her to the gun. Another soldier rushed forward, pulling the child away, shouting in Pashto to calm him. The rest of the fight blurred. More insurgents fell. The tower was cleared, charges set, radios smashed. By dusk, the mission was done. But Julia's mind wasn't. Back at base, the squad moved like shadows. Mill's bunk was stripped bare, another bag by the door. Julia sat on her cot, staring at her hands. They were steady now, but earlier, for 1 second, they hadn't been. 1 second of hesitation could have cost them all. Barlow entered, pacing like a caged wolf. We neutralized their comms. That's a win. But Mills, his voice cracked, then hardened. We can't let this break us. Tomorrow we'll hit them harder. That's how we honor him. The squad nodded, but no one believed it. Wins didn't feel like wins anymore. Later, Julia stepped outside, drawn by the desert night. The stars stretched infinite, uncaring. She thought about the boy, about the look in his eyes. She thought about Vega's grin, Mills' jokes, Anderson's laugh. All fading ghosts. Footsteps approached. The SEAL commander again. His presence carried a weight that silenced everything else. He studied her face in the moonlight. You saw something today, he said, not asking. She swallowed. A kid. I almost, her throat closed around the words. But you didn't. You chose. And you chose right. Her fists clenched. How can killing ever be right? His eyes narrowed, like steel. Because sometimes it means someone else lives. That's the war you're in, soldier. Not the one you want, but the one you've got. You think hesitation saves innocence? It kills more of it. His words cut like knives, but she couldn't deny the truth. He nodded once, slow. Your squad follows your fire. Don't forget that. You hesitate again, they pay the price. Then he turned and walked into the night, leaving her shaking under the weight of it. Julia stared at her tattoo, the little wing inked into her skin. She used to see it as hope. Now it looked like a burden. A reminder that every shot she fired wasn't just about her survival, it was about all of theirs. The night dragged on. Sleep didn't come. She heard Mill's last gasp in every gust of wind. She saw the boy's eyes in every shadow. And beneath it all, the commander's voice echoed. Don't forget. By dawn, she knew something had shifted. She wasn't the same soldier who had clung to that gun in the ambush. She wasn't even the one who had watched Vega get carried away. Something colder, sharper, had taken root. When the sun rose, burning the horizon gold, Julia strapped on her gear again. Pain lanced her shoulder, ghosts pressed at her chest, but her jaw was set. She would stand. She would not hesitate. Even if it broke her, the air inside the armored Humvee was thick with sweat and gun oil, the kind of oppressive heat that made every breath feel like work. Julia sat with her rifle across her lap, helmet tilted forward, eyes fixed on nothing. The road ahead shimmered, desert stretching endless, but her mind was still back at the tower, back with Mill's last gasp, back with the child's eyes that wouldn't leave her no matter how she tried to shake them. Her squad was quieter now, almost brittle. Every joke died before it landed, every laugh cut short. Anderson, Jorgensen, Klein, Vega, Mills, too many names, too many empty bunks. Even the newer replacements, fresh faces barely breaking in their boots, carried the weight. Julia felt it every time she looked at them, the expectation. She was the one who stayed steady behind the gun. She was the one who fired when no one else could. And whether she wanted it or not, that made her a kind of anchor. Barlow's voice came through the headset, curt as ever. Listen up. Command just pushed intel. There's a suspected weapons cache in a farming village 2 clicks south. Small, isolated. Possible connections to the same cell. We're ordered to secure it and bring in anyone useful for questioning. Expect resistance. Rules of engagement are tighter this time, civilians likely in the mix. Keep your heads. Tighter rules. Julia's jaw clenched. Rules didn't stop bullets from finding throats like Mills. Rules didn't stop insurgents from strapping bombs in children's bedrooms. She gripped her rifle harder, telling herself she would not hesitate. The convoy rattled into the village under the blinding afternoon sun. Mud brick houses clustered around dusty courtyards, goats tied to posts, women in long dresses carrying water. At first glance it looked peaceful, almost ordinary. But Julia had learned peace in this place was always a mask. Locals stared as the soldiers dismounted, their eyes sharp, unreadable. Children froze mid-play, vanishing into doorways as if pulled by invisible strings. Julia's pulse quickened. She swept her gaze over rooftops, alleys, windows, every shadow a threat. The squad split into teams, moving door to door. Julia kept overwatch from the Humvee, her finger never leaving the trigger guard. She watched Barlow and 2 others approach a small house with a faded blue door. The sergeant kicked it open, rifle first. Shouts followed, then a woman's scream. Clear, came the call, but moments later another voice, tense, we've got something. 2 men were dragged out, hands bound, rough burlap sacks thrown over their heads. The squad hustled them toward the vehicles. Julia caught the flash of metal as one of the men tried to twist free, a blade glinting in his hand. Without thinking she fired a short burst, cutting the knife clean out of his grip. The sound echoed through the village like thunder. The crowd reacted instantly. Women wailed, men shouted, children cried. Rocks clattered off armored plating. Tension spiked like electricity in the air. Julia swiveled the gun, warning, not firing. Barlow barked orders, forcing the situation under control. The prisoners were shoved into the back of a vehicle. Julia's eyes swept the rooftops again. That was when she saw it, a figure darting behind a chimney, lifting something onto his shoulder. RPG. Rooftop, left side, she screamed, squeezing the trigger before the words were even out. The man dropped, the launcher clattering uselessly onto the tiles. But her rounds punched through the wall too, and when the dust cleared she saw more than a fighter lying still. A woman. Maybe mid-30s. Maybe just unlucky enough to be in the wrong room. Her breath caught in her throat. The rooftop figure's body slid into the courtyard below. The woman's body slumped against the wall, unmoving, blood blooming across her dress. The wailing around her grew louder, sharper, turning into fury. Julia's hands trembled on the grips. She forced them still. If she hadn't fired, they'd all be dead. She told herself that, repeated it like a mantra, but the woman's face seared itself into her mind anyway. The squad pulled out fast, rocks and shouts chasing them. The prisoners sat shackled and silent in the back, their sacks dark with sweat. Julia kept the gun steady, eyes scanning, though the only thing she could see was the blood spreading through fabric on that woman's chest. Back at base, the interrogation tent swallowed the prisoners. Julia stayed outside, sitting on a low wall with her rifle across her knees, sweat cooling into a clammy chill. Barlow came out an hour later, face grim. They know something, he muttered, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. They're tied to the same bastards who set the tower. We'll be hitting another site tomorrow. Command says we're close to breaking their network. Julia nodded, but her stomach twisted. Close. Always close. But at what cost? That night she couldn't sit still. She wandered to the edge of the base, where the desert stretched endless under a sharp crescent moon. The silence out here was suffocating, broken only by the distant thump of artillery somewhere far off. She thought about Vega, maybe alive, maybe gone. She thought about Mills, blood soaking the dirt. And she thought about that woman in the village, her body slumping in slow motion every time Julia closed her eyes. Do you want to know the truth about your choices? The voice came from behind. She turned to see the SEAL commander again, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. He didn't wait for her answer. The truth is, every shot you fire echoes twice. Once in the moment, once in your head. And the second echo never fades. You'll live with that woman's face for the rest of your life. Just like I live with mine. Julia swallowed hard, throat dry. Then how do you keep firing? Because hesitation kills more than certainty ever will. His gaze hardened. You think I don't see it? Your squad looks to you. They see you fire, they fire. They see you hesitate, they die. It's not fair, but fairness died the day you put that uniform on. She looked down at her wrist, the wing tattoo dark in the moonlight. Sometimes I don't know if I'm holding them up or dragging them down. You're both, he said bluntly. That's what leadership feels like. That's the weight. She wanted to argue, to reject the weight he was shoving on her shoulders, but deep down she knew he was right. They did watch her. They followed her. And that meant every mistake echoed twice as loud. When she finally returned to her cot, dawn was creeping in. She lay awake, the tattoo burning against her skin, the echoes rattling inside her skull. She promised herself she wouldn't falter again. Not for her. For them. The next mission came faster than she expected. A convoy at dusk, engines growling, the horizon painted in fire. They were hunting another cache, another cell, another shadow. Julia climbed into her position, hands steady now. Her shoulder ached, ghosts pressed close, but her eyes were sharp. As the desert swallowed them, she thought of the commander's words. Every shot echoes twice. She gripped the gun tighter, jaw set. She would carry the echoes. She would carry them all. And she would not hesitate. The storm rolled in before dawn, thick clouds sweeping across the desert sky and pressing the air down with a heavy stillness that made every breath feel weighted. Sergeant Elena Torres sat against the crumbling wall of an abandoned compound, her rifle laid across her knees, eyes narrowed on the distant horizon. She hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours, but her body had learned long ago to treat exhaustion like background noise. The radio static crackled in her ear, spitting out fragmented updates from other platoons pushing through the valley. None of it made her feel better. The enemy wasn't broken yet. If anything, they were gathering. She rubbed the small wing tattoo on her wrist out of habit, a talisman she barely remembered getting during her reckless early years. It had once been just a thing, an impulsive decision. Now it felt like a brand that people stared at in disbelief, the mark that had gotten her mocked until the SEAL commander himself had cut through the noise and saluted her. It wasn't about ink anymore, it was about surviving moments like this, when everything teetered between victory and annihilation. Her squad was down to 7. Ramirez had been airlifted out with shrapnel in his chest 2 nights ago. Johnson hadn't made it out at all, he'd bled out in Elena's arms before the medevac could even attempt a landing. She forced the thought away. Focus was the only thing that mattered now. Movement, whispered Keller from the corner of the courtyard, his rifle already trained on the edge of the ruined alley. Elena slid forward on her knees, glass crunching under her boots. The alley lay empty, wind stirring dust through its cracked stone. She motioned for Keller to hold fire. Sometimes the shadows were more dangerous than gunmen. One false trigger pull and they'd reveal their position to the entire valley. Hold it, Elena breathed, her voice calm though her pulse was thudding hard. Then it happened, a flicker of cloth, a shift of rubble. The enemy was testing, probing, watching them just as much as they were watching back. It was a game of patience. Whoever cracked first would pay. We're sitting ducks if we stay here, whispered O'Connor, crouching low beside her. His freckles stood out like bullet marks in the dim light. We need to move. Elena shook her head. They want us to break cover. Give them a clean shot. And if we don't move, we're boxed in. She hated that he was right. The enemy wasn't just random fighters. Whoever led them had discipline, timing, strategy. They were laying the trap brick by brick. She pulled the radio MIC close. Falcon 1, this is Torch. We've got contact in Sector Delta, but we're not engaging yet. Requesting drone recon overhead. Confirm. Static, then a strained voice. Torch, Falcon. Negative on drone coverage. Air's grounded for another hour, storm's too thick. You on your own. Her jaw tightened. On their own again. She turned to her squad. We don't wait. We push east through the alley, keep it tight, keep it silent. If they want us boxed, we'll break out before they lock the door. The nods came without question. Trust wasn't optional anymore, it was all they had left. They moved out, silent shadows slipping through rubble and broken archways. Elena led, her rifle raised, finger brushing the trigger guard. Each footstep echoed too loud in her ears, though she knew in reality it was barely audible against the wind. Halfway through the alley, the world exploded. Gunfire raked down from the rooftops, chipping stone and throwing sparks where rounds hit metal. One of her soldiers screamed, a sharp, gutting sound, before being dragged behind cover by Keller. Elena dove sideways, pressing herself against a cracked wall as bullets chewed through the space she just occupied. Contact. Multiple rooftops, she barked, firing a burst toward the muzzle flashes. Smoke out. Grenades clinked across the dirt, billowing white smoke into the alley. Visibility dropped instantly, the world reduced to choking fog. On me. Elena shouted, grabbing O'Connor by his vest and dragging him forward. She could hear the enemy repositioning, boots pounding above them. The smoke gave them seconds, maybe less. They stumbled out of the alley into a wider street lined with gutted buildings. The firefight roared to life again. Keller returned fire from behind a burnt-out car, while Silver, barely 19, hurled a grenade onto the nearest rooftop. The explosion rocked the air, raining debris down. The squad pressed forward, covering one another in bursts, leapfrogging from cover to cover. Elena's lungs burned, but adrenaline kept her sharp. Every movement mattered, hesitate and you died. They reached the far end of the street and ducked into a half-collapsed building. Silence followed, broken only by the distant rattle of rifles. Elena's heart hammered in her ears. "Report," she ordered, chest heaving. "Davis is hit," Keller said, voice raw. Davis lay against the wall, blood soaking through his thigh, his face pale. Bullet went clean through, but his losing blood fast. Elena dropped to her knees, tearing open her med kit. She pressed gauze hard against the wound, Davis groaning in pain. "Stay with me, Davis. You hear me? Stay with me." His eyes flickered. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarge." She tied the tourniquet, her hands steady though her insides churned. She couldn't lose another one. Not today. When the bleeding slowed, she looked at the others. Their faces were etched with exhaustion, fear, and something deeper, the slow realization that the enemy wasn't breaking. If anything, they were being driven deeper into the lion's den. She exhaled sharply. "We're not going to hold this city by playing defense. They'll grind us down, one by one." "So what's the play?" O'Connor asked. Elena glanced out the shattered window. Across the street stood a tall structure, one of the last intact towers left in the district. Its roof would give them a vantage point, and if intel was right, the enemy's radio relay operated nearby. "We take that tower," she said. "From up there, we spot their positions and call in a strike. We cut their comms, they lose coordination. It's risky, but sitting here is suicide." No one argued. That, more than anything, told her how desperate they all were. They moved again, slipping across the street under covering fire. The tower loomed above them, its entrance choked with rubble. Inside, the air smelled of dust and burned paper. They climbed the staircase, rifles raised, every step a potential ambush. Halfway up, gunfire erupted from above. Elena ducked, bullets sparking off the stairwell. "Return fire," she snapped, and Keller dropped two enemies leaning over the railing. They kept climbing, boots hammering metal steps, until they burst onto the rooftop. The city sprawled below, burnt-out vehicles, shattered walls, smoke curling from dozens of firefights. The enemy was everywhere, but from here, Elena could finally see the patterns: squads moving with purpose, relays hidden under tops, trucks idling as command posts. She keyed her radio. "Falcon, this is Torch. We've got eyes on enemy relay at grid 5 to 7. Marking coordinates now. Request immediate strike." The response was strained but hopeful. "Torch, Falcon. Copy. Stand by." The squad spread out, rifles trained on the streets below. Minutes stretched like hours. Davis lay pale against the wall, Keller bandaging him tighter. O'Connor muttered a prayer under his breath. Then the sky lit up. Jets roared overhead, and seconds later, precision bombs hammered the relay site. Fire blossomed across the city, shockwaves shaking the rooftop under their boots. Enemy comms went silent, just like she'd hoped. Cheers erupted from her squad, raw relief spilling out after hours of terror. Elena allowed herself a tight smile, though her eyes stayed sharp on the horizon. Victory was never final. Not here. As the smoke rose, her radio crackled again. "Torch, Falcon. Good hits. But listen, satellite reckon shows enemy reinforcements inbound from the north. You've got less than an hour before they hit the city. Extraction's being scrambled. You need to hold until then." Her stomach sank. Hold for an hour against reinforcements twice their size. With a wounded man and dwindling ammo. She looked at her squad. Dirt-streaked, blooded, exhausted. But alive. "We hold," she said firmly. "We hold this ground, no matter what comes." And as the storm winds howled across the city, the enemy regrouping in the shadows, Elena knew part one of the battle was over. The real fight hadn't even begun. The first distant rumble didn't come from the storm. It was the sound of engines, dozens of them, growing louder through the wind like an approaching tide. Sergeant Elena Torres stood on the rooftop with her rifle slung tight, her jaw clenched. Reinforcements were rolling in, heavier than anything her squad could hold back on their own. She swept her binoculars toward the north. Dust clouds swirled in the distance, churning up from armored trucks and technicals. Black banners fluttered, carried by the convoys like a warning. The enemy wasn't broken. They were mobilized, disciplined, and coming fast. "Contact north," she muttered into the radio, her voice low but steady. "Estimate 200, maybe more. ETA 20 minutes. O'Connor cursed softly beside her. "We're 7 people with half a mag each and 1 man down. What the hell do they expect us to do, throw rocks?" Elena didn't answer right away. She scanned again, calculating, her pulse pounding hard but controlled. Then she lowered the binoculars. "They expect us to hold until extraction arrives," she said. "That's it. Hold." "Yeah, but extraction in an hour." Silva, the youngest, looked pale. His hands shook where they gripped his rifle. "We won't last 10 minutes against that." Elena turned to him, her gaze sharp enough to cut through his panic. "Listen to me, Silva. We don't need to outgun them. We just need to outsmart them. Terrain, choke points, distractions, that's how you fight an army when you've only got a squad." The word steadied him. Steadied all of them. Keller, grizzled and calm as ever, checked his bandages on Davis, who was pale but conscious. "You give the word, Sergeant, and we'll make this city bite them in the ass." That was exactly the plan. Elena moved quickly, pointing out positions. "Keller, O'Connor, you set up crossfire down the main street. Silva, you're with me on the southern flank. We funnel them into kill zones, then fall back, keep them guessing. Davis stays here, rooftop overwatch. He can still pull a trigger." "I can still fight," Davis rasped, lifting his rifle with shaky hands. "Don't count me out yet." Elena gave him a tight nod. "Then make every bullet count." The minutes stretched thin as wire. They laid out claymores, rigged tripwires, stacked rubble to funnel movement. Every second mattered. By the time the first enemy trucks crested the ridge, the squad had turned the ruined district into a maze of traps. The roar of engines filled the air, joined by shouts and the clatter of boots as enemy fighters poured into the streets. The city echoed with their voices, confident, eager. They thought they were closing in on prey. Then the first trap went off. A technical rolled over a buried charge, the explosion ripping it apart in a fireball that lit the night. Shouts turned to screams. Fighters scattered, straight into the crossfire. Elena fired in short, controlled bursts, dropping targets as they stumbled through the choke point. Keller and O'Connor raked the main street, mowing down lines of fighters before ducking back under covering rubble. The enemy faltered, but only for moments. Discipline took hold, and they pressed forward again, returning fire with terrifying volume. Bullets chewed through walls and windows, showering dust and splinters. "Reloading." Silva shouted, fumbling with his last magazine. "Make it count." Elena barked, squeezing off her final rounds before slamming in her second-to-last clip. She could feel the tide pressing harder, heavier. A rocket slammed into the building across the street, blasting stone and fire into the air. The shockwave nearly threw her off balance. She coughed dust, her ears ringing, then dragged Silva behind cover as more explosions hammered the block. "They're softening us up." O'Connor yelled over the chaos. "Trying to flush us out." Elena keyed her radio, her voice iron. "Falcon, this is Torch. Reinforcements are here. We're engaged heavy. Extraction needs to move now." Static, then a strained response. "Torch, Falcon. We're working it. Hold your ground. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. She ground her teeth. 30 minutes was a lifetime in this hell. She leaned out, fired, ducked back. "We bleed them for 30 minutes. Every block, every step. No retreat beyond the tower, we lose this ground, we lose the evac." Her squad answered with gunfire. The fight descended into chaos. Streets filled with smoke and fire. Elena's traps detonated one after another, grenades rigged to doors, claymores hidden in rubble, improvised charges built from salvaged munitions. Each blast slowed the enemy, tore holes in their ranks, but more kept coming. Elena moved like a ghost through the ruins, firing, shouting orders, dragging Silva by the vest when he froze under fire. O'Connor cracked jokes even as bullets whipped past his head. "Remind me to never vacation here," he yelled, grinning with teeth bared in fear. "Shut up and shoot." Elena snapped, but she almost smiled despite herself. Minutes blurred into a haze of muzzle flashes and explosions. By the 20th minute, ammo was nearly gone. Keller tossed empty mags aside with a growl. "I'm down to my last." "Same." Silver shouted, voice cracking. Elena checked her own pouch. 2 magazines left. That was it. Then the enemy pushed harder. Trucks rolled up, mounted guns blazing, cutting through walls like paper. Fighters surged behind them in waves, chanting, firing, relentless. The squad fell back to the tower, dragging Davis inside. The building shook as rockets hammered its base. Dust rained from the ceiling. "They're gonna bring this whole damn place down." O'Connor shouted, firing his last rounds into the street before slamming the empty mag away. Elena's mind raced. She knew they couldn't hold the tower forever. But if it collapsed before extraction arrived, they'd all be buried alive. She pulled out the last card she had, a small transmitter tucked into her vest. She keyed it, her voice sharp. "Falcon, this is Torch. If you can't get us out in 30, you'll be picking through rubble for our tags. We need fire support now." Static, then a crackle. "Torch, Falcon. Gunship en route. ETA 2 minutes. Hold tight." Her heart surged. 2 minutes. If they could survive that long, they'd have a chance. "Gunship incoming," she shouted to her squad. "Keep them off us till then." The last 2 minutes were hell. The enemy stormed the tower base, hammering the doors, blasting chunks of wall. Elena and Keller poured fire down the stairwell, each shot deliberate, each trigger squeeze a lifeline. Silver hurled his last grenade, the explosion echoing like thunder. Then the sky screamed. The gunship roared overhead, miniguns shredding the streets with streams of fire. Explosions tore through the enemy ranks, ripping vehicles apart, scattering fighters like ants under a boot. The ground shook with every strike. Cheers erupted from the squad, raw and desperate. Davis fired from the rooftop, his pale face lit by fire. O'Connor whooped like a madman, empty weapon held high. Within minutes, the enemy broke, retreating into the smoke. The street fell eerily quiet, bodies and wreckage littering the ground. Elena sagged against the wall, chest heaving, sweat and dust streaking her face. They were alive. Barely. Her radio crackled again. "Torch, Falcon. Extraction inbound. Mark your position with smoke." Elena fumbled for a flare, firing it through a shattered window. The red trail arced into the sky, a beacon in the storm. Minutes later, rotors thundered, and Black Hawks swept in low, kicking up dust as ropes dropped. "Move," she shouted, dragging Davis toward the ropes. One by one, her squad climbed, exhausted, battered, but breathing. Elena was the last. She hooked her harness, glanced once more at the burning city below, then let herself be lifted into the night sky. Inside the bird, the squad slumped against the walls, too tired to speak. Blooded, bruised, eyes hollow. Elena sat among them, staring at the small wing tattoo on her wrist. They had held. They had survived. But at what cost? Her radio hissed one last message before cutting off. A voice, low and cold, "This isn't over, Sergeant. You've only delayed the storm." She froze. The line went dead. Her stomach tightened. Whoever was out there, whoever had organized this, wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She closed her eyes as the Black Hawk carried them away, the weight of survival pressing heavy on her chest. Victory tasted like ashes. And the war was far from over. The helicopter ride back to base should have felt like salvation. Instead, the cabin was heavy with silence, the kind that wrapped around bone and pressed down on lungs. The squad sat in their seats, weapons slung limp, blooded uniforms stiff with dust and sweat. Only the thrum of rotors kept them tethered to the moment. Sergeant Elena Torres kept her eyes fixed on the floor. She should have felt relief. They'd held, they'd survived, they'd bought enough time for extraction, but the voice over the radio replayed in her head like a curse. "This isn't over, Sergeant." It had been deliberate, taunting. And worse, personal. O'Connor broke the silence first, leaning back against the cabin wall with a grunt. "Hell of a vacation, huh? Sun, sand, and bullets." Keller snorted despite himself, though it came out more like a cough. Even Davis, pale and trembling with his leg bound tight, managed a ghost of a smile. The humor was thin, brittle, but it kept them human. "Save the jokes for when we're not bleeding out," Elena muttered. "Bleeding out builds character," O'Connor said, his grin lopsided. Silver looked at him with wide, haunted eyes. "We almost died out there." "We did die," Keller corrected flatly, his voice gravel. "Johnson." Ramirez. Don't forget them. The cabin went quiet again. Elena's chest tightened. Names became weights carried long after the battlefield had gone quiet. The helicopter banked, and the sprawling base came into view, floodlights cutting through the storm clouds. Dust swirled as they touched down. Medics rushed in, hauling Davis out on a stretcher. The rest stumbled onto solid ground, legs shaky but steady enough to walk. Elena followed last, her rifle heavy across her back, her hand brushing the small wing tattoo on her wrist. Inside the command tent, the air was electric with chatter, radios buzzing, officers hunched over maps, screens flickering with drone feeds. The commander, Colonel Barrett, looked up as Elena entered, his hard eyes sweeping over her and the ragged squad behind her. "Report," he said. Elena stood straight, exhaustion buried under discipline. Enemy reinforcements engaged. "We held the district long enough for strike support and extraction. Casualties, 2 KIA, 1 WIA, remainder combat effective." Barrett studied her, then nodded slowly. "You did more than hold. You broke their relay. Command's already seeing disruption across the region. You bought us time." Time. The word rang hollow. She wanted to believe it meant progress, victory. But she knew better. The enemy was disciplined, organized. This wasn't some scattered militia, they were coordinated, funded, led by someone who understood modern warfare. She hesitated, then added, "Sir, before extraction, I received a transmission. Enemy voice. Said this wasn't over. Addressed me directly." Barrett's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. "Noted." "That's it?" "Noted." Elena asked, sharper than she intended. "Careful, Sergeant." His voice was steel. "You and your squad did your job. You'll be debriefed, resupplied, and redeployed. The war doesn't pause for cryptic messages." Elena swallowed her frustration. "Understood, sir." He dismissed her, and she led her squad out. That night, in the barracks, sleep didn't come. The storm outside rattled the tin roof, but it wasn't the thunder that kept Elena awake. It was the memory of the voice, low and certain, threading into her bones. She rolled the thought over and over until exhaustion finally dragged her under. When she woke, dawn light cut through the window. Her squad sat scattered across the room, Silver cleaning his rifle with obsessive precision, O'Connor scribbling in a small notebook, Keller staring at nothing. Davis was gone, evacuated to a field hospital. Elena pulled on her gear and headed to the briefing tent. Inside, maps had been updated. Red marks spread like blood across the valley. The enemy hadn't retreated after last night. They'd regrouped. Worse, they were pushing into villages, using civilians as shields. Colonel Barrett didn't sugarcoat it. "Our mission is containment. We hit their supply routes, cut them off, force them to bleed resources. If we break their logistics, we break their campaign." The orders were clear. But the weight of them sat heavy. Containment meant more firefights, more traps, more dead civilians caught between lines. After the briefing, Elena gathered her squad. Their eyes searched hers for something, reassurance, certainty, maybe even hope. "We go back out," she said simply. "Different sector. Same fight. We've been here before. We know the cost. But we're still standing. That's what matters." Silver's jaw tightened. "How many more times can we keep standing?" "As many as it takes," Elena answered. The words tasted like grit, but she meant them. They moved out at dusk. The convoy rattled through the valley, trucks kicking dust as they wound past scorched villages and broken farmland. The silence in the cab was different this time, not fear, but grim acceptance. At the village outskirts, they dismounted. The place was eerily quiet, doors hanging open, laundry flapping in the wind. Too quiet. "Eyes up," Elena warned. They advanced street by street. And then the ambush hit. Gunfire erupted from windows, rooftops, alleys. Bullets tore the air. Keller went down hard, his vest absorbing the hit but knocking the wind from him. O'Connor hauled him behind cover, swearing. Elena snapped orders, her rifle barking as she drove enemies back from the nearest building. Silver froze again, eyes wide, until she shoved him hard against a wall. "Focus, Silver. Don't think, shoot." He blinked, then fired, rounds ripping into the window where muzzle flashes had danced. The fight raged, close and brutal. Grenades shook the narrow streets. Smoke burned lungs and eyes. Elena moved with precision, instincts honed razor-sharp, but inside she felt the creeping dread. The enemy wasn't just fighting, they were herding. Forcing the squad deeper into the village. They broke into the central square, and then she saw it. A banner hung across the burnt-out mosque, black with white markings. And beneath it, bodies, civilians, executed, lined like warnings. Her stomach clenched. From the loudspeaker, a voice boomed. Low, mocking. The same voice from the radio. "Welcome back, Sergeant Torres. I told you, it isn't over." Her blood ran cold. The squad froze, stunned by the deliberate taunt. "Who the hell is that?" O'Connor hissed. Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. Her grip tightened on her rifle as her mind spun. Whoever this was, they weren't just an enemy commander. They knew her name. They'd singled her out. Gunfire tore the moment apart. The square erupted into chaos as fighters poured from every side. The squad fought like cornered wolves, teeth bared, firing in every direction. Keller roared as he laid down suppressing fire. O'Connor shouted curses with each shot. Silver clung to cover like it was life itself. Elena moved through the storm, her focus narrowing. She scanned rooftops, windows, shadows, hunting for the source of the voice. And then she saw him. A figure in black, standing tall on the mosque roof. Calm amid the chaos, hands behind his back as his fighters swarmed. His face was hidden by a scarf, but his posture, his stillness, it radiated command. Their eyes met. She couldn't see his expression, but she felt his smile like a knife pressed against her skin. A rocket slammed into the square, blowing apart the ground between them. Elena was thrown hard against a wall, ears ringing, vision swimming. When she staggered up, the figure was gone. The square burned, her squad scattered and firing desperately. "Fall back," she screamed, dragging Silver by the vest again. "Fall back now." They broke through an alley, bullets chasing them, until they burst into the open fields beyond the village. A convoy of armored vehicles thundered in, friendly forces laying down suppressing fire. The squad dove into cover as the tide turned, the enemy forced back into the smoke. When it was over, the square was rubble, the banner torn, the bodies still lined like ghosts. And the commander, the one who knew her name, was gone. Back at base, Elena stood in front of Colonel Barrett, her voice steady though her insides burned. "He's real. He's watching us. He knows me." Barrett's gaze was hard. "You're saying the enemy has singled you out?" "Yes, sir." "And you believe he'll strike again?" "I don't believe. I know." Barrett was silent for a long moment, then finally said, "Then we find him before he finds you." Elena left the tent, the weight of the promise pressing heavier than her rifle. She looked at her squad, battered, scarred, but alive, and knew the fight wasn't close to over. She touched the small wing tattoo on her wrist, the mark that had once drawn laughter but had become something else entirely, a reminder of flight, of survival, of resilience. And as the storm gathered again on the horizon, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real war was only just beginning. The mysterious commander had made it personal. And she was ready to answer. The end.